Well done, Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope it will be good, Mr. Farfoy, and I'm sure you'll be waiting with bated breath to see what happens next. But, Mr. Speaker, when I rose to speak on this bill for the first time, it was at its second reading, I had to confess to not having read the whole thing. And I can now report, Mr. Speaker, that I still haven't read the whole thing. It'll be a bit of a surprise to you, but it's tempting that it has been to sit down and try and plough my way all the way through this bill. I have to confess I haven't managed to do that. Mr. Speaker, though, it is a vitally important piece of legislation, and I know when we've got a title like Judicature Modernisation, we have a bit of a laugh because it's a funny word, we're not sure how to pronounce it. But this is a very, very serious bit of legislation, all 1,200 pages or so of it, I think, critical to the future of the judicial system in New Zealand. Now, for a justice system to be just, it needs to be accessible to the people who are trying to access it. And so in this modern age where when we go online to do our banking, we go online to find out almost anything that's going on in the world, it just seems a little bit archaic that our justice system requires everything still to be focused on paper, still requires everything to sort of be managed in that way. And so, amongst other things, amongst this great tome of paper here, Mr. Speaker, is the provision for all judgments to be put online, where appropriate, to ensure that they, obviously at times those won't be necessarily appropriate to be released, but to ensure that everybody can have access to that. Mr. Speaker, instead of actually having to go down to there and do all that kind of sort of research, going through all the paper, Mr. Speaker, online using technology is going to be paramount going forward for a just judicial system. That's right. I think one of the other things that really jumps out at me, which you would think in this modern day and age would be happening already, but because we haven't modernised the judicature, yes, thank you, because we haven't modernised this already, is the provision for audio-visual links to be able to be used, and this will be of particular use in remand situations. So obviously when somebody's on remand, they may have to come backwards and forwards from wherever it is they're being held on remand to the court for various different appearances, over bail, over at various different stages. And so, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, sorry, what this bill will allow to have happen is for those particular hearings to be able to take place via an audio-video link. Very good. Of course, this saves the taxpayer money, amongst other things. It also improves safety, because every time you transfer someone who's in custody, then obviously there's greater security risks that go with that. So we're improving security, we're improving accessibility, and of course we're making it more cost effective as well. Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge the Justice and Electoral Select Committee of the 50th Parliament, because that's who dealt with this through this system. And obviously they were a very hard-working committee, because they did manage to get their way all through this bill and have made a number of recommendations. They've made some important clarifications. For example, to raise the value of personal property that is exempt from seizure of judgment debtor to $5,000 for their tools of trade and $10,000 for their necessary household furniture and effects. And this, of course, makes it consistent with the High Court's threshold. Mr. Speaker, that's just one of the things that has been picked up on. There's a whole list that they've come up with, but I do want to commend them for doing that. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I just do want to say there's been a number of SOPs put forward on this particular bill. And I just want to say that a number of them have been put up by the opposition. They're not all going to get voted against by this side of House. SOP 62, in the name of Jacinda Ardern, obviously makes a very clear point that actually it's going to put in a sub-clause which will read that nothing in this Act affects New Zealand's continuing commitment to the rule of law and sovereignty of Parliament. Absolutely important that we continue to uphold those things, have that inscribed within our modernised Judicature Act. And Mr. Speaker, I'm really looking forward to the third readings as we get through this bill.
Yes, O'Rourke.